Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, the show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. Today's programme is all about creating lasting impact through fashion. First, we'll meet the co-founder of a menswear label that pushes beyond mere corporate social responsibility targets in its quest to make a real difference.
We need to do something more, and we have to do it with our hearts. We have to do like heart projects, and that is what I want to be remembered for.
Then we'll hear about Ukrainian soft power as we meet the founder of an online boutique that aims to promote the country's rich culture and support its fashion industry through the challenges posed by conflict.
We call it fashion diplomacy, and it's a great tool to make people pay attention to our country through this subtle and elegant way.
This is The Entrepreneurs with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Andreas von Der Heide is the co-founder of Deux, a Danish menswear lifestyle brand offering a wide collection from basics to knitwear, trousers, shirts and accessories. Founded back in 2011 by two friends with two completely different backgrounds, the brand was born out of their shared mission to blend their contrasting preppy and urban styles into one united clothing line. The bigger dream? Well, that was to really change people's lives throughout the world. Certainly a lofty goal, but I'm delighted to say Andreas is here now to tell us more about it. Now, Andreas, it's great to have you at Midori House finally, between running into you at SIF and your appearance at our last Quality of Life conference in Munich. So it feels like we should have done this earlier. But let's start at the beginning. Tell us about the start of your journey with the brand.
It's always been about people, and the true story is we started 13 years ago. And it started out, I was in law school, I met a good friend of mine. He came from a totally another culture. We had two different beliefs, two different backgrounds, coming from two different parts of the world. And what we basically found out that no matter how you look, where you're from, what your beliefs are, there is also something coming together from two different perspectives or two different parts of the world. If you merge that, something special comes out of it. And we work based on a friendship. So it's always been about people. Of course, it's been about building a brand, but it was also building a friendship. And that's also how we run the company, both internally and externally. If we have to look at why we succeed, we are an eye level, we believe in people, and we're out there with people. So for me, this is a people industry. And having the founding team in the company gives the nerves, because no matter how big we get, our intention has always been to change people's lives. It sounds really big, this one, but into something positive. And it doesn't matter whether you are a co-worker or you are a partner or you're part of one of the communities that we act. And that is also why we did the legacy program.
Well, yeah, and we'll talk about that program specifically because it's super interesting. But just to pick up on that point about this duality, look, it's called Deux, right? And there's the two of you, and there is this duality of your interests. But it's interesting, that runs through, I think it runs through the collections, doesn't it? There's often this duality. I remember when you were talking to Natalie a few months ago and you were talking about the late night service, like this sort of inspiration for a more recent collection. And it was this duality of night and day, maybe a little bit. And I don't know, there's something really beautifully simple about reflecting that duality, because that's also how people live. There's often a sunny side and a darker side, or a moodier side and a happier side. Is that very conscious in terms of when you're thinking about collections, for example, to reflect that duality always, or does it happen a bit more organically than that?
No, that is, no matter what we do or how we do it, there's always going to be these two opposites. So if you look at the collection and the way the design team works, it's such a big part of our DNA. If you look into the collection, the initial thought was that, okay, my ex-partner Virgil, he was loving streetwear, and I was more like the classical Ralph Lauren polo inspired kind of guy. And what we love to do is to mix and match, and we don't like to be in these boxes. We take like the best part of everything. So right now I'm a bit more street, but if I go out tonight or tomorrow I feel more casual, I'll jump into that. So going into our collection, you can go down both alleys. So when we do the photo shoots, the collection designing, our communication, when we do the pop-up shops, the activations and so on, we also always have these two opposite sides.
Is there a typical Deux customer? wearer, do you have someone in mind? I often ask people who are behind smart fashion brands or lifestyle brands about who they have in mind, whether it's kind of an abstraction or how does that work? Do you do that, or do you actually try and keep to your instincts a little bit and not so much picture that person?
Everyone who feel like they want to be part of us is more than welcome. Of course, we have somebody in mind. Deux has always been an interpretation of who we are as we grew up. That's also why we brought in the kids collection. We were a bunch of friends doing this brand, and suddenly we had kids and we brought that in. But I think between 25, 35, sport interested, fashion and lifestyle interested, normal kind of man.
Just kind of normal folks. I like that. Talk about growth, because you talk about the growth of the business in this kind of organic way a little bit. One of the pressures on founders often is to grow maybe quicker than they might like. Other people say, oh, come on, you should be in this market or doing these collections and all the rest of it. Sustainability, not in terms of materials or anything, but making sure you're growing sustainably. Well, is that a challenge, or again, or do you find it's, if you stick to your principles, it's actually fairly straightforward?
Earlier on, let's just say, take us back 1 or 2 years. Yes, we wanted to grow fast, but actually just the other day we had a big opportunity for this most beautiful French shop that I've been chasing for so long, and we have so much to do right now. It's a difficult market. Deux is actually doing remarkable good, but then this chance coming up, and I'm going home to my wife, and I'm actually talking to her, I think I should take this one, and she looks at me and like, okay, she goes through my days, my week, my traveling, and she say, are you capable of doing that now? Do you do it with a smile on your face, or are you just chasing through it? And that's actually the first time I stopped up and I actually said no to the deal. Let's wait just 1 or 2 years to do this shop so we can do it perfectly. We have been chasing growth because starting a brand or starting any kind of business every day is about survival. Until you reach a certain level where you are profitable enough to not slow down, but take a step back and have an overview of the situation. And I think that's where we are right now. Deux has been built in a very profitable way. It's built with a strong business foundation, and that gives us a lot of chances in this market right now.
She sounds like a smart lady, your missus. Is she a psychotherapist, or is she a philosopher or something? She's got it all figured out.
No, I think the beautiful story is that I met Louise in law school the first year. She was my teacher. I invited her out, and we got married. We have 3 kids. So I think she is the one person in the world knowing me the best. And she could just tell that, okay, this is not now. And even though she's not a business partner, she is absolutely my go-to person every time I have doubts or thoughts. Call it a therapist, call it a...
It's a bit of everything, right?
It's a bit of everything. That's how
work.
A wife should be, right?
Imagine if you'd gone to a different law school. Your life would be very different, wouldn't it? Just think, reflecting on these amazing meetings that you've had there, extraordinary stuff. Let's talk a little bit about retail. You've alluded to it a couple of times. Are you a fan, presumably, even when you were a young kid walking through shops, did you like to go and look at products, try them on, be around them? We know about 2020 and how difficult it's all got. Where are you at in terms of the role of retail, the frontline experience in serving the great stuff that you make to your communities?
I absolutely love retail, and I absolutely love products, and that's why I'm in this business, because I love what the product can do for you. It can give you confidence. It can give you a certain feeling just wearing clothing. It can tell a story. I always tell that before switching back to retail, if you just talk about product and why they're so important. I lost my father. I inherited a watch, and wearing this watch is actually a material thing reminding of my father that he wore this. Taking it back to retail, how retail and the online shopping has been developing, and the whole everything is on sale, I absolutely hate it, and that will ruin retail going forward. But good service, the right product mix, the feelings and experience that we can do in retail, the old school retail should be coming more to life than ever. And I actually just read a story on LinkedIn when I traveled here about some cool UK guys actually telling the same. It's a people business, as I stated in the beginning, and that is what retail is about. It's about presence, looking each other into the eyes, telling about the product and selling the product, giving that feeling, because in the end, it's not only about going into a shop and buying a product. It's the whole experience. It's the packaging. It's the talk you have there. It's the sizing, the fitting, the coffee that you might have, the talks, or just coming in and people say, how are you? That's what I love about retail. And that's why retail will and have to survive.
Well, I've already said I'm going to send you around the corner to go into the Monocle store. They don't know this yet, but you're on the way. So they best be on their best behaviour. Let's see how we measure up. Then you have to report back to me afterwards. Listen, you mentioned your dad there, and I remember from hearing you speak in Munich at our conference before, you talked incredibly, arrestingly. You could have heard a pin drop in the room. People were really blown away by the way that you've adapted to an unimaginable challenge and loss to pivot into something that's profoundly positive. And you talked amazingly about how you want to build something for your kids so that they understand your legacy. And I know that the charitable part of the business is shaped a little bit by that experience. But talk to me a bit about building that legacy and what it means, and a little bit about how there are these seismic changes, aren't there? You lose a parent, you become a parent. These things reshape your direction in a way it's hard to articulate, but tell me a little bit about that journey and how that's fed into the decisions that you continue to make.
So I became a dad in a earlier age. I was 25. I was about to build my business. I did a lot of running. I was still in law school and so on. So it was a quite busy period of my time. But having Hamilton and of course also my other son Cornelius and now Noel has changed as it does. Suddenly I started reflecting on, in the beginning it was just building the business, going out there, being profitable, having the good news and so on. And suddenly when I sat and I read all these really nice articles, I was like, there's a link missing. Because looking back, and I haven't read anything about my father, if he had been running a business and I was only reading about profitability and so on, it seemed like a bit empty to me. So I called up my business partner Christopher and said we need to do something more, and we shouldn't just do this because of normally CSR and we're doing good for the world. We have to do it with our hearts. We have to do like heart projects every year. Because actually back when we started the project, we did a lot of small things, built a school in Africa, because I did a long run where we got a lot of money collected and so on. I said, all the small things that we are doing, we've never been telling stories about it. What if we did something called the legacy? Because I wanted to leave a legacy that was more than just being profitable or building a nice brand or doing nice products. And as it is always, we sat down and we created legacy, which is I don't like to call it CSR. I call it's our heart projects. And that is what I want to be remembered for, no matter whether it's building schools around the world. And then we had to take it into our DNA. So in the beginning, we wanted to do always a project back home, and then we wanted to do a project abroad. We changed that, saying we want to support kids with sports and education, because then we can actually change the next generation. And then we wanted to do it within our communities. So throughout our supply chain, we can do a project with our factories in Turkey, Vietnam, or China, whatever. Or we can do, as we did last season, build basketball courts for a student that can't afford to go to school or something like that. And that is also a big part of the entrepreneurial spirit that is within Les Deux. We actually build something, and you see the smile on their faces and so on. So that is the legacy. But the reflection came when I had my first kid.
And it's interesting, because you mentioned this problem of corporate social responsibility. I think that the need for it to be something meaningful, more meaningful and deeper, it's often being driven by the consumer. They're smart and they know when they're getting served up something for, whether it's greenwashing or to do a checkbox exercise. Consumers now want businesses to really mean it, don't they? And they can tell when they're being peddled a story or whether it's something genuine. And you keep coming back to this point about building community, and your community cares. And I don't think they would engage, would they, if it was a box ticking exercise? It's because they know that you mean it, right?
But I don't care, to be honest, whether they care about the legacy program. They might not. I hope they do. I think they do. But it's for me, it's for my partner, it's for our business. It's because we do something that we think is right. It's not about marketing, because then I would have done it much differently. For me, it's just how I want to be remembered. It's what I actually love doing. And you can't see my smile on my face here, but standing in the middle of New York, or in the desert where we have in Turkey, close to the Syrian borders, opening a school, seeing the smile on their face and feeling the difference that you do, and seeing people with so little and you'll be able to give them just a little bit of what we have here in our world. That is actually a gift being an entrepreneur.
He is beaming people. I can attest to it. He's smiling broadly. Let's talk a bit about collections, because we talked about growing sustainably, but also it's a passion project and making sure you're following your heart a little bit, because why else be in this business? What does that look like, that process, season to season, year to year? How does that process work? What should we look forward to in the rest of 24 and beyond?
I would love to have Matthias, our creative director, sitting here and going back. He just came on as a graphic designer, and now he's the creative director. So we have 4 collections a year, and then we're launching a few collabs from time to time with different partners. Fashion has changed, and we are not the front runners. We are not fast fashion and so on. We are adapting to the market and putting our DNA into it, building up the nice qualities and so on. What I love is the involvement in our jacket category, and then especially our knitwear category, where early on we've been known really much for our jersey, our pants and so on. And then the guys are basically just traveling the world. They just came home from New York. Last time it was Copenhagen and the jazz scene that we took something from. And now it's New York, it's sports. We're going a little bit more back to the preppy side of it, adding ties and so on, lifting it a little bit, maturing the brand a little bit maybe. Yeah.
And tell me about where that inspiration comes from, because obviously you travel a great deal, and you've mentioned already, in New York, and then there's this bit of a spark, and the creative team can go off in a new direction. Is it important to just keep an open mind? I don't know. Do you find your inspiration comes in from the pages of a book or a magazine or in a particular market? How does that work?
Depends on whether it's on the sign and the clothing part, or it's the business side and the marketing side. My daily business is more with the branding side of it. I think Matthias is overseeing. We're going to Japan. Hopefully we're going to meet with Fiona in a few weeks to see both the retail team and the development out there, taking a little bit from there, and actually also going back in the times with one of my biggest aspirations, which is Mr. Ralph Lauren, and what he did with Paul Ralph Lauren in the early days. And I was just sitting the other night, just going through old commercial, whatever you call it, and saying, wow, this is still so relevant. And you just see the brand going up again. So I think we find inspiration from everywhere. Textures, forms, Danish design, qualities from Italy, and the retail scene from Japan. We were out there. We are talking to people. We taste on life, and that's where we find our inspiration, adding our DNA. So I don't think I have like a specific answer to that.
Not
question.
a go-to.
Not a
no, that's
go-to.
good. Take inspiration from every corner.
I was sitting in the tube when I was here, and we've been talking about something in the management team where we were lacking a little bit on the branding side. And boom, in the tube, I started taking notes and sending it to the management team. What do you think about this? What do you think about it? And then everybody just tapped in, and we started sparring. And it's actually a holiday back in Denmark, but everyone was just on it and said like, okay, wow, good idea. And then we just started sparring, and then a lot of ideas just came on.
It's amazing. There's funny air down in the tube underground here in London. It's not the cleanest air. Maybe there's something funny in there coming out of the fabric of those disgusting chairs that's inspired you. Let me ask you this, Andreas. When you do you sometimes sort of pass someone in the street and you notice they're wearing some leather product? Does that happen? And do you have to stop yourself, or do you have to kind of go over and get into a conversation with them? Or what happens? Or do you still get a little kick just out of it if you just see some people having a great day? It's a stylish guy, maybe. I don't know. What happens when that happens?
Yeah, that just gives me a spark in my stomach. I don't know whether that's the right pronunciation.
I know what you mean.
Term.
I know what you mean.
I mean, in Denmark and in Scandinavia, it's becoming like an everyday. It's very normal. But I was just traveling to a little island in Thailand called Hanoi, and suddenly there was a person from the US wearing our clothing, and I was like, okay, that feeling I got there was like, wow, I had to stop and talk to him. So I do that from time to time.
Are they happy? Are they happy to hear from you? Presumably, yes.
They thought it was quite funny, and actually they went to the Bloomingdale shop where we've just opened a pop-up shop. So seeing someone in the US or wherever meeting up somewhere in Thailand, yeah, that makes me really proud and really happy.
And then you were like, the retail strategy is working, people. It's definitely working.
We still have a chance.
Listen, what are you most excited about? What's coming up next?
We are opening our next office, our very own Deux office, in this one in Paris with the new team. And then we have a lot coming up. We are opening shops with another Bloomingdale's in Soho. We are opening up with Fred Segal in LA. We are opening a huge pop-up shop. Going to talk to Andrew about that. Maybe we should do something with Monocle in Paris, La Galerie Lafayette this summer during the Olympics. We have so much going on right now.
So people don't need to find you. It sounds like you'll find them. Probably.
I always said that they are more than welcome to come and see our HQ, which we are really proud about in Copenhagen. And we have everything from a basketball court to a wine bar. So if you're in Copenhagen, stop by.
That was Andreas von Der Heide, the co-founder of Deux. And you can learn more about the brand by heading to lesdeux.com. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. I'm pleased to say we're joined now in the studio by Monocle's Julia Lasker. Lovely to have you on the programme, Julia. A warm welcome. Regular listeners to Monocle Radio, especially our news shows, will know of your Ukrainian roots. You've recently interviewed the founders of a brand supporting your country's fashion industry, trying to help it navigate and survive the war. Tell us a little bit about who you've been talking to and what you discovered.
Thank you so much, Tom. Yeah, so I met Maria Swant at her offices in central London. She's the founder of I Am Volya, which is a multi-brand online boutique of Ukrainian designers and creators. So she grew up in Ukraine, she grew up in the port city of Mariupol, and then she moved to the UK to study fashion business here. And then when the war started, when the full-scale invasion started, she was in Kyiv with her husband and they both fled. And she became involved in humanitarian efforts to kind of help Ukrainian refugees. But she decided she wanted to use her fashion business knowledge specifically to help Ukrainian fashion, to act as a cultural diplomacy, like we'll hear in a few minutes, but also to help the economy because it's a really important part of buoying up the Ukrainian economy and allowing it to be more resilient.
Well, tell us, Julia, a little bit about how this model that she devised then, how does it actually work? I believe you've seen some of the pieces and so forth. Tell us a bit more about the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, so she's really interested in highlighting really excellent designers, so really, really big names down to the emerging names in the Ukrainian fashion industry. She's really proud of Ukrainian fashion because it's very reflective of the country's vibrancy, vibrant culture, vibrant folk culture, which is mixed very often with contemporary styles. And she loves the way that everything is made within Ukraine by artisans and craft is kept alive, which is quite rare these days in Europe. So she told me about Gunya project, which is an absolute favourite in Ukraine. The First Lady wears the pieces from there all the time. And that's kind of reimagining folk for contemporary designers. Then there are smaller brands, really innovative, like Orchis. They create plant-based sunglasses, which are made from, for example, recycled coffee grounds and mixed with flowers. So gorgeous things like that. And then there are names like Frolov, and Frolov is the most famous Ukrainian designer, one of. At the moment, he's worn by everyone from Beyonce to Sabrina Carpenter.
I love the sound of this. It's about innovation and creativity born of necessity, born of pride as well. It sounds amazing. Let's play the interview. Just introduce it to us, Julia. What are we going to hear to kick this off?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I Am Volya unites smaller brands with massive names. So I began by asking Maria to tell me about how she goes about contacting the brands and building a relationship with them for the boutique.
So when I decided to create I Am Volya project, first thing I did with my background in fashion business, I sat down and I wrote a business plan. So with the business plan, I listed the most prominent, to my opinion, Ukrainian brands that I want to see in my selection. And after that, I just looked online at the email addresses or Instagram pages of the founders, and I would just email them or simply send an Instagram message with a link to extraction of my business plan. So when I was approaching them, they would already know that I'm talking something serious. Because at the time when I was in the process of creating I Am Volya, what was happening is that a lot of people would want to help somehow and would want to do some pop-ups all over the world, but many of them would not mean it seriously. So I contacted them all, they all replied, we built our relationship, and after that was 10 brands actually, and after that all the other brands would just themselves email us and text us and would want to join our selection. And then of course I Am Volya selection is a representation of my own taste, therefore there are some criteria that have to be met in order to join our brand list.
telling the world about Ukrainian fashion, Ukrainian design? How does it feel to kind of almost represent your country or be at least part of the soft power? Is that part of your work or not?
Of course, yeah, that's an essential part of my work. We call it fashion diplomacy, and it's a great tool to make people pay attention to our country through this subtle and elegant way. For example, when we would do offline pop-up events, a lot of people would just come from the streets. Some of them would be tourists from all over the world. Some of them would be just locals going to do their errands and popping in and find something interesting. And that would open a dialogue with people. We would talk not only about the brand, but about the designer who's behind the brand, their personal story, sometimes even about the production. Some of the productions are still in areas that are heavily affected by the war. For example, Katsurina brand, they have their production in Kharkiv. And during the winter time, what happened is the missile struck the production center and everything was destroyed. So we talk about that, and people come inside just to look at pretty things, but they leave with a story behind. Sometimes they're sad stories, sometimes they're interesting, fun to know stories, and that just promotes our country and what we are going through.
And can you tell us also about pop-ups as part of your work? What do they like to do? Are they good for your business? Are they good for the business model, especially in fashion? Why are they positive?
Pop-ups are great to bring awareness and to attract as much crowd to your project as possible. That's why whenever we host a pop-up, we try to have it in a prime location where you have a lot of footfall. And again, it's great to open a dialogue with people, but as well as to increase your audience, because so many people would not know about us, but then they would discover, they would buy something, they would talk and they would understand more their sizing and everything. They get familiarized with the brand, and then they would transfer this experience to an online store promoting something different. That's why I think fashion industry in Ukraine is great.
That was Maria Suant, and I'm still with Julia Laska here in the studio. Julia, did she give you any sense beyond what we've already heard about what might be next for the boutique?
Yes, so she wants to open a physical store, brick and mortar store, presence in London. But by hosting these pop-ups, she's mentioned in different locations, she's testing out sort of what works best, what kind of design works best, the atmosphere that they want to create, how she can create the most success for I Am Volya.
It's a fantastic story. Julia, thanks for reporting. And if you'd like to find out a bit more, head on over to iamvolya.com. And that's all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. Do keep an eye and ear out for Eureka, available every Friday. The Entrepreneurs was produced by Laura Kramer, with audio editing by Tamsin Howard. You can listen again and find out more about the show at monocle.com, or you can follow and catch up with the archive via your preferred podcast platform. If you'd like to drop a note to the team, write to Laura on lrk@monocle.com. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs.